This is my new office. It has been years in the making. From removing the carpet and wallpaper, to painting and rewiring, to installing new flooring, to ordering the wood slat wall panels to improve acoustics, to researching LED strips, to figuring out what the hell I needed to buy to control them, to finding a power supply for the controller, to cutting and installing and making mistakes and eventual repairs, to programming, to being able to sit right here and enjoy it. Years. Whether you're interested in wood slat wall panels, LED lighting, WLED, or Home Assistant, there will be something for everybody in this video. Hi, I'm Jeff. Welcome to Fast How To, a channel where I discuss smart homes, smart home products and tech, and other related nerd topics. My mission with this channel is to empower you to be able to build your dream smart home by sharing my knowledge. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, or if you just like to hang out with me, hit that subscribe button below. Appreciate it. One thing I would like to mention before we get started though is my smart home survey. I really want to get to know you guys better, so I created a survey asking about what types of smart home devices that you currently use, what you'd like to use but don't, what some of your biggest challenges are, and bonus, there's a spot at the end of it for you to make suggestions for the channel and directly ask me questions. There's a link in the description below, so if you could spend 5 minutes and fill that out, I'd really appreciate it. At the end of this video and every video going forward, I'll randomly pick one or two of those questions from the survey and answer them for you. Kind of like a little mini AMA or Ask Me Anything. The next thing I want to mention is that links to all the products that I used can be found in the description of this video. Those affiliate links allow me to earn a very small commission at no cost to you. And if you use my link for the wood panels, you'll also get a 12% discount, so be sure to check that out. 12% may not sound like much these days where everything is buy one, get one, but you're looking at almost $2,000 worth of panels on the walls here, so that's a savings of over 200 bucks. I do want to mention that I bought and paid for everything in this video myself out of my own pocket. While I am fortunate enough to be able to sign up for affiliate programs as a creator, this video is not sponsored in any way, so the opinions that I share with you are honest and sincere, and most importantly, they're my opinions, not opinions that have been suggested to me, if you know what I mean. Lastly, this video is going to be lengthy, and I'm going to go into a good amount of detail about all the topics that I mentioned above. Since making these videos takes a lot of time and energy, I would really appreciate it if you'd watch the whole thing, but I did include chapters just in case you feel the need to skip around, or you've only got time to watch half of it now and need to come back later or whatever. First things first, let's start with the wood slat wall panels. Now, I don't know how many of you have figured this out about me or not, but I really try to be of the buy once, cry once type of mindset. What does that mean? In a nutshell, it means if you're going to buy something, you should buy the best quality that you can afford with the expectation that you will enjoy it more and it'll last longer. Now, obviously, I don't have a money tree out in the yard, so I do balance this philosophy against cost. All things being equal, though, the old adage is still generally true. You get what you pay for. I did a lot of research on wood slat wall panels, like shitloads of research. I read companies' websites, I read reviews, I watched install videos on YouTube, all sorts of stuff. What I found is that while there are some commonalities between panels, there are also some pretty key differences. First, most of the panels are sold in roughly 1 foot by 8 foot dimensions. Most companies, including the one that I purchased from, more on that later, sell the panels 4 to a box, so one box covered a 4 by 8 section of wall. There are a few companies that'll make panels of custom dimensions, usually up to about 12 feet, but they can get very pricey in a hurry, as I'm sure you can imagine. Next, shipping is expensive. Boxes of this size are considered oversized packages, and carriers can and do charge a premium to deliver them. Measure once, do your math twice, and order one time. Trust me, the shipping for one box is just as expensive as the shipping for 10 boxes, a lesson that I learned the hard way. As for the panels themselves, there are three basic categories of wood slat wall panels: veneered MDF, solid wood stained, and natural hardwood panels. Let's take a look at each. Veneered MDF panels are a manufactured product. MDF stands for medium density fiberboard. MDF is used for all sorts of things. Most notably, you've probably seen it if you've ever bought any of that flat packed, made in China wood furniture like bookshelves. It's also commonly used to make speaker boxes and inexpensive painted kitchen cabinets, especially the door and drawer faces. It is flat, dense, heavy, and inexpensive, and these properties make it a popular choice for finished products that'll be veneered, painted, or otherwise covered like speaker boxes. The typical formulation of MDF is approximately 82% wood fiber, 9% formaldehyde resin glue, 8% water, and 1% paraffin wax. That second ingredient, formaldehyde, that's one of the big reasons that I don't like it. Now, I'm obviously not some teetotaling CrossFit health nut, but that doesn't mean that I don't try to make good decisions when I can. Formaldehyde is a known carcinogen, and MDF can release it into the air. More on how that happens in a minute. Either way, that doesn't sound fun to me. The other reason that I dislike MDF is that when you cut it, those fibers from the fiberboard part, they don't turn into sawdust. They just turn into dust. That dust contains that formaldehyde resin glue that I just mentioned, and cutting or sanding it releases very fine particulate matter into the air, which means that you need to wear breathing apparatus when cutting it, and not to mention that shit gets everywhere. Cutting that stuff makes one hell of a mess. Not to mention that because of the formaldehyde, you need to clean up really well after the fact. Now, that's not to say that finished products that use MDF are all bad. If they were, I'm sure they would have been banned by now. But unless the height of your walls exactly matches the height of the panels you buy, you're going to have to cut it. Take it from me. I don't care how nice your house is. I promise the walls and floors are not as flat, square, and level as they look to the naked eye. Not to mention the fact that you are still going to have to allow for light switches and outlets. The next step up from MDF panels are solid wood stained panels. These panels are made of solid wood, typically a lesser expensive wood such as pine, and they're stained or painted to achieve the desired appearance. They're very easily cuttable, and while being more expensive than MDF panels, they are still significantly less expensive than the hardwood panels that they imitate. They also weigh a lot less than MDF panels, making one-person installation much easier. In addition, they place far less of a load on the underlying walls, which may be a consideration for some people. At the top of the pyramid are natural hardwood panels. These panels use solid hardwoods such as oak, walnut, or teak, and can get very pricey. While these panels are undoubtedly the Cadillac of panels, cutting them can be more difficult since the woods are harder, and depending on the wood that you choose and the lighting in the area that you'll be installing them, you might not even be able to easily tell the difference once they've been installed. On the other hand, there is a much greater variety of wood species and finishes available with these panels than there are with stained panels, so depending on the look you're going for, these might end up being a great option for you. What did I choose? I decided pretty early on that I did not want a veneered MDF panel, and the look I was going for didn't really require natural hardwood, so I decided to go with solid wood stained from a company called Hosvita. Don't forget to use the link in my description for a 12% discount. I think the project turned out great, and using solid wood stained panels instead of natural hardwood saved me quite a bit of money. It ended up taking me 11 boxes to completely cover the two walls that I did in this room. Here you can see the construction of the panels. You've got just about a 1/2 inch gap in between the slats, and the slats are both stapled and glued onto this nice heavy felt backer. I attached them to the walls using drywall screws through the felt between the slats, and as I'm sure you can tell, you can't really see the screw heads at all. Installation was really easy, but it was tedious and very time consuming. It's really a measure twice, cut once type of operation, since you cannot just run down to the local big box and buy some more of these like you could if you cut a 2x4 a bit short. Let's run through all the stuff that I used to do the install. Again, buy once, cry once. Now, the tools that I used are not the most expensive stuff out there, since I'm not a construction professional and these tools don't get used 8 hours a day, every day, but I have had most of these for several years now, and they have never let me down. First up, we've got a tape measure. Any old tape measure really will get the job done, but when a job only calls for one tape measure, I love this one here from Lufkin. The extra large foot on it makes for super easy one-handed operation, and the high contrast markings on the tape make it very easy to read. It stands up easily on its own to make marking easier, and the locking mechanism is solid and easy to operate. Next, I used a roll of 2-inch wide painter's tape. This is to draw the cut lines onto the panels since you don't want to draw directly on the wood. I just used a Sharpie and a metal straight edge to draw on the tape. To cut the panels to length, I used a jigsaw with high quality Bosch blades. If you don't have one, I'm a big fan of this one here from Makita. Just make sure that you've got new blades, so you've got nice clean cuts, and make sure to check your cut lines on the back for any staples before beginning each cut so that you don't ruin the blade. You're also going to need to use a razor knife when you're making holes in the felt for light switches, like that one there, or outlets. Again, any old razor knife will get it done, but I really like this safety one here from Cat. If it slips out of your hand, the blade disappears. Also, it's got this handy little lock so it doesn't accidentally deploy while it's in your pocket. Box extenders are a must since you don't want the contacts from your switches or outlets to rub against the felt after install. Unless you've got arms like Popeye, I would strongly recommend a screw gun, and once again, my choice is Makita. Jammed on the end of it, you'll find a Bosch impact bit. Again, links to all this in the description. A stain pen will also be needed to stain the cut ends of the panels, especially around the outlets and switches. Varathane makes some really nice ones, and they're very easy to use too. Just press down on the wood to get the stain flowing, and then color the wood like you're using a marker. A box of drywall screws to attach the panel, a hooked pick tool, and a pair of pliers to remove an occasional staple will round out the required tools. If you've got some money to spare and you really want a nice install, then an oscillating tool makes things much easier than a jigsaw when you're cutting around outlets and light switches. This one here from Makita is my favorite, and again, I prefer Bosch blades. You're also going to want some eye protection. I like these here from 3M. They're very comfortable, honestly. Another thing that you might want is a level. Don't need a huge one. I've got a 6-foot level upstairs, but really this is all you need. I use this to check and make sure that my door case is nice and vertical. Lucky for me, it was. I know that because I installed it when I redid this room, so didn't have to worry about that. But another thing that might be useful is a laser level. So most of these, if not all of them, project a cross in laser onto the wall. If you find one that doesn't project across, don't get it. You want one that definitely shoots across onto the wall. I'll leave a link to this Bosch one in the description, but you want that because the vertical part of that is what you're going to use to hang these slat walls. The horizontal piece is also very, very useful for hanging pictures or any kind of hangers or anything, These hangers here, I hung using the horizontal line from that laser level, and I use these for hanging my camera bag and laptop bag and all kinds of stuff. They work great. I'll leave a link to those hangers in the description as well if you want them. I got them on Amazon. An optional tool that you might need is a trim puller. This thing is a lifesaver, trust me. This is made by Zenith, and again, I got this on Amazon, so I'll leave a link in the description for you. But I needed this for this project. I bought it a while ago to pull other stuff, but the reason I needed it for this project was, as you may remember from watching previous videos, I had a chair rail on the wall. That had to come down. This is the tool that I used to get that off the wall without damaging the drywall. Awesome tool. Installation is super easy. Just measure from the top of the baseboard or the floor or wherever the bottom end of the panel will be up to the ceiling or the crown molding or wherever the top of the panel will be. Then take that same measurement again, but move over by the width of the panel. So if you're using 1 foot panels like these, measure again 1 foot over. If your panels are 2 feet wide, measure 2 feet over. Remember what I said earlier about your house not being square, level, and flat? That's why. I left approximately a 1/4 inch gap at the top so that I could run the wiring for the LEDs, but more on that later. I found it easiest to cut the panels with the plastic wrap still on, since then I didn't have to peel the tape off the wood. So measure from the end of the panel and then drop a piece of tape across the entire panel. Put a mark on the tape on one edge of the panel, and then measure down the other side and mark the second measurement. Then just use your straight edge to connect the two measurements and cut along the mark with your jigsaw. This will account for one measurement being 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch different than the other. I attached the panel to the wall using 12 drywall screws. I ran 4 screws down the leftmost gap, 4 screws down the rightmost gap, and then 4 right down the middle. You can also glue these to the wall using construction adhesive, but I chose screws to make life easier in case I decide to change things up down the road. Much easier to remove them by unscrewing and then filling the holes than it would be to try and remove construction adhesive. If you want to get fancy with your measuring, you can always use a laser measure, like this one here from Leica. They've got models of these things that Bluetooth connect to your phone to automatically import the measurements and all sorts of stuff. They're really awesome. And if you're a homeowner, you should probably have one anyway. Anyway, since you'll be covering the wall, now is a great time to add any additional outlets that you may want, or to relocate any light switches or outlets. That's outside the scope of this video, but I thought I'd mention it since it's not something that many people think of. What I found to be the easiest was to leave all the light switches, outlets, and cover plates installed until I got to them. This makes things much easier since I can just measure the distance from the adjacent panel or the door case, as well as the height from the floor, to easily get the dimensions for where to cut the panels to fit them. Once I've got the measure, I kill the power, remove the faceplate and the switch or the reset, and then using the faceplate as a template to cut the panel, I use the measurement from the previous case or the previous panel or what have you. It worked great. Note that you may also want a headlamp in case it's dark when you're doing this and the power's out. Cut the necessary section of slats out with the oscillating tool, pull out any staples as required, pry the slat off the felt, and then I used a razor knife to cut the felt. Remember to cut the hole in the felt smaller than the cover size so that you can hide the hole behind the plate. Then just install the panel, pull the wires through the hole, install the box extension, then the switch or reset, and put the cover back on. Easy. Now, the edges of the panels fit together to create a seamless look because one edge of the panel is just felt and the other edge is a slat that hangs over just a little bit. I found it easiest to leave the felt edge facing the direction that the next panel will be installed rather than trying to wedge the felt under the edge of an already installed panel. The last bit of advice that I have for this is to begin with a whole panel at the door case and work towards the corner. It is much easier to wedge things into a corner or hide any odd cuts or gaps in a corner than it is to have half a slat against a door case. That would look like hell. Okay, now that we spent all that time talking about the dumb home part of the project, let's get to the smart home part of the project, the LED lighting. I've got 42 individual LED segments installed here, 21 temperature adjustable white and 21 RGB. Because I couldn't find a black diffuser to my liking that fit between these slats, I decided to go with FCOB lights, which essentially have built-in diffusers. The RGB strips are on black tape, and the white strips are unfortunately on white tape. I really would have preferred that they also be on black tape, but I couldn't find any at the time that met the needs for my installation. Once again, we'll get started with everything that I used for the installation, parts and tools. I ordered these strips here from BTF Lighting. They're 24 volt strips, and I chose 24 volt because if I had gone with 5 volt, I would have needed a much larger power supply. Using 24 volt, I was able to use a 500 watt power supply, but more on that later. The math worked out that one strip did 2 segments for me, so I ordered 11 of each strip thinking it would get it done. I was wrong. If this is your first LED lighting project, order at least one more of each than you think you're going to need. You're going to mess one up, you're going to cut it wrong, you're going to wire one wrong and short it out, all sorts of nonsense. Just trust me. If you end up doing things perfectly the first time and they all work right for you, the Amazon's return process is pretty painful. Am I right? Next up, you're going to need connectors. These are necessary to jump from segment to segment. Yes, I could have done a better job of tucking the wires in, but I don't ever stare up at the ceiling, and if I hadn't shown that to you, then it's not something that you would ever see because it's not ever going to be in the frame of any of my normal videos, like when I'm sitting right here. Regardless, you'll need those connectors as well as some wire. These connectors are super easy to use. You just cut the wires to length, insert them into the holes, and then clamp it shut. Then you slide the LED strip into the other side and clamp that shut. Make sure to order connectors of the correct size and configuration for your strips. If you buy the same strips I did, you can use the connectors shown here. One thing worth noting is that I actually had to disassemble some of the connectors and modify them. This is because the strips that I used have 3 connectors, but because they're FCOB strips, that means that 2 connectors are on one side and 1 is on the other side. You need to make sure that the connectors have those little vampire taps on the correct side to match up with which end of the strip you'll be clamping it onto. I just used one of these tiny little screwdrivers to pry them apart and modify them, but you'll need these for the controller anyway, so you may as well just order them now. Since there's only so long that each run can be before you start seeing voltage loss, you're going to need some connectors to plug into the ends of all the strips that you buy. I used these and they worked great. Here's the wire that I used, and again, no complaints, worked great. To connect those wires to the 3-pin connectors, I used Wago connectors. This was the first time I had ever used these, and all I have to say about them is, where have these been all my life? You're going to want to buy some 3M double-sided tape to hold the LED strips into the slats. The adhesive that's on the back of them, not exactly the world's strongest adhesive, so some of mine have fallen down. When that happens, I just pull the entire strip down out of the slat, install the 3M tape on the back, and stick the whole thing back up. That has fixed the problem, and had I known that going into this, I would have done it right from the beginning, which is what I recommend that you do. Okay, now we got all of our wire, connectors, Wagos, adhesive, and everything else. Let's talk tools. Again, you're going to need a tape measure. Same one I used for the slats worked just fine. You'll need wire cutters. For this, I really like these here from Klein Tools. You may also need these for the switch and the reset work when you're doing the slat wall, and the few dollars more make it well worth it over these cheap flat stamp ones that are like $4.99 at Horror Freight. Next, you'll want some cutters for cutting the LED strips. I used these, and once again, they worked great. Again, much more expensive than a Horror Freight special, but your kids will still be using them. Trust me. wire strippers are next on the list. What's that? Why didn't I just use the stripper built into these? I'll tell you. Trust me. When you've got to strip as many pieces of wire as I did for this whole project, you want something much faster and much easier. How much faster and easier? Let's just say that after the first time that I used these, I was hopping mad at myself for not buying a pair decades ago. If you don't have a pair of these, get one. No need to thank me. You can just use any old pair of scissors that you've got handy to cut the double-sided tape. Nothing special needed there. Start by measuring the length of segment that you'll need. If you're smart, you wrote down your measurements from doing the slat walls. Measure from one end of the strip and then make your cut. The strips are marked with cut locations. Pay attention to the direction of the arrows. That arrow direction indicates the direction that data travels on the strip. This is very important. If you connect the data to the wrong end, it won't work. Ask me how I know. I installed the first strip of each run with the arrows facing up the wall and the factory installed connector at the bottom of the strip. I installed the strips starting at the top of the wall and worked my way down to ensure that I didn't have any gaps up there, since due to the cut locations on the strip, I couldn't cut them to the exact length that I had measured, and a little gap or a little overrun at the floor end is much less noticeable since it's probably going to be behind furniture. At the top of the strip is a crimp-on connector and a 3-wire jumper going over to the next strip. I just cut those wires a little long, and then when the next strip went up, I held the wires over, eyeballed it, trimmed them length, and then clamped them in. The next strip needs to be installed with the arrows facing down. To do this, I simply measured from the other end of the strip so that I could use the factory connector on that end also, essentially cutting a small piece out of the middle of the strip. Then I put a connector on the cut end, ensuring that the vampire taps matched the contact locations on the strip. If you install a third strip on your run, it needs to be installed with the arrows facing up, and the fourth with the arrows facing down, the fifth with the arrows facing up, and so on. There is a limit to how long runs can be, and that depends largely on what voltage your strips are. There's also some other limits, which we'll get into in the controller section of this video. Now, I suggest cutting each strip to length as you go, since you may need more strips with arrows running in one direction than the other, which will affect where you cut the strip, since you may have to cut off the factory installed connector. If you did it the same way that I did, you should have 2 segments wired together at the top with a connection from each at the floor, meaning that each strip on the wall will have a connector hanging from the strip towards the floor. The first connector that starts the run is going to be wired to the controller, so ignore that one for now. If you've got more than 2 strips in the run, then connect the bottom of the second strip to the start of the third strip. The third and fourth strips should already be connected together at the ceiling, remember? If you've got a fifth, then wire the bottom of the fourth to the start of the fifth. Again, pay attention to the direction of the arrows. Starting at the beginning of the first strip, you should be able to trace the direction of the wire connections with your finger, and the arrows should follow that. For these 24-volt strips that I used, I wouldn't recommend connecting more than 5 strips into a single run for standard 8-foot walls anyway. If your walls are taller, then fewer. Now that we've got the strips all wired together, it's time to wire them to the controller. First, choose where your controller is going to be so that you can figure out how long the wires need to be. Mine is hiding on the bottom shelf of this corner unit over here behind me. Wire in power, data, and ground to the first strip of the run and leave the other end of the wires over where your controller will be. Make sure that there's an outlet reachable near where your controller is going to be. If you're going to do any power injection on the strips, then connect those wires in the middle of the run or as close to the middle of the run as you can. Connect both power and ground, but not data for the power injection. Data should come from the previous segment. Why would you want to do power injection? Depending on how long the run is back to the controller and what gauge that wire is, you may lose voltage over that distance. Depending on how many strips in your run, you'll start seeing voltage drop towards the end of that run. That voltage drop can cause issues with different brightness levels, issues with color accuracy, issues with effects, all sorts of things. Just trust me, it's much better to be safe than sorry in this department. So because of this, my runs ended up being 2 strips, then 3 strips, then 2 strips, then 3 strips. The reason that they're like that is because I had originally planned to do 4 runs of white and 4 runs of RGB, each consisting of 5 strips, so that's how I put them up on the wall. Then when I was finished, I didn't like how that looked, since it stopped just a bit short by the door on the wall over there, so I added an additional strip of white and an additional strip of RGB, but not before figuring out that I couldn't drive all that from a single controller anyway. So rather than remove all those strips and flip some of them around, rehang them, rewire them to do runs of 2, 2, 2, 2, I just did the alternative 2, 3, 2, 3 thing. It worked out pretty well so far, but anyhow, that leads us into the next section, the controller. So what did I end up using here? Well, I went with a Dig-Octa from Quinn LED. What's that? Let's take a look. The Dig-Octa actually comes in multiple parts, a power board and a brain board. You can have multiple of each depending on your needs. With my original plan of 4 runs of white and 4 runs of RGB, I would have needed a single power board and a single brain board, so that's what I ordered. Dig-Octa 8, 4 white, 4 RGB. Math sounded simple to me. I did the math on power consumption and ordered a power supply that could run all the white or all the RGB strips at once, since I didn't ever plan to have both of those sets on at the same time. One of the big reasons I went with the power supply that I did was because as you start getting into more powerful power supplies, they're no longer off the shelf anymore, and they require that you hardwire them in. This one just plugs into the wall, and then you wire the output from it to the inputs on the power board. I found that to be more convenient for me, but your mileage may vary. Again, links to all this stuff is in the description. In any event, I wired it all up, got to work configuring the segments. Initially, I figured I was going to need 40 segments. Why 40? Well, I wanted to be able to control each of the strips on the wall individually. 20 white, 20 RGB, 40. Truth be told, what I really wanted was 80, since I wanted to be able to split each strip in half and control the top of the wall separate from the bottom of the wall, but that's not really important for this. What is important, as it turns out, is that the WLED software only allows for a maximum of 32 segments. Damn it! Okay, so I went back and ordered a second brain board. Easy enough, since you can just stack them and they get power automatically from the same power board. They do support Wi-Fi, but I chose to hardwire mine since there are network ports literally a foot away from them on the wall right there. I prefer wired connections whenever possible anyway, since I find them to be more reliable. Anyhow, once that came in, I installed that and rewired my stuff, and voila! Now I could properly address all my segments. So why is this even important? Well, remember when I told you that you should be able to trace the wiring with your finger and the direction of the arrows should match? Yeah. Well, if you think about that for a second, you'll realize that every other strip on the wall is upside down. WLED software allows you to break up larger runs into segments, and then you can mark those segments if the software needs to reverse the direction. If all you want to do is have the strips light up one solid color, then that's not important for you. But if you intend to do any effects at all, then you're going to want to make sure that you reverse the segments in the software that have the arrow pointing down. Otherwise, your effects are going to be upside down on those segments. I also chose to add a digital microphone to my setup so that I can have the RGB strips do effects that are sound reactive, since I thought that would be cool. And you know what? It is. Here's a side-by-side example of a sound reactive effect. Note that I've muted the music since I don't want to get a copyright strike, but if you're curious, the song that I'm using is Da Funk by Daft Punk. Pretty obvious that one of them doesn't look right, isn't it? Okay, anyhow, this is where that little set of screwdrivers comes in. I use these here. They're cheap and they work great. I didn't feel the need to spend a ton of cash on these since I think I can count on one hand the number of times that I've needed to work on screws that small. Assemble the brain board and the power board using the included hardware. Then connect the wires. Power and ground go to the power board and data goes to the brain board. Then wire the positive and negative from the power supply to the power board and install the microphone if you've chosen to use one. Now, if you're using wired Ethernet, you're all set. It'll grab a DHCP address and come right up on your network. But if you're using Wi-Fi, then it'll advertise a Wi-Fi network called WLED AP with a password lowercase WLED 1234. Complicated, I know. Anyway, connect to that, configure it to connect to your Wi-Fi network. It's also worth noting, though, that if you do choose to add a microphone to your setup, you're going to need to install the proper version of WLED that supports the audio reactive feature. Note that if you're using wired Ethernet, the port won't be active then until after a reboot. I found that out the hard way too. I'll leave a link to the QuinLED repo in the video description along with everything else. Connect to your WLED instance by entering the IP address of it into your browser. You should either already know what that is if you've configured it during the Wi-Fi setup, or you should be able to find it by using your firewall or router's DHCP server. Worst case, I guess you can always port scan for it, but that's well outside the scope of this video. I'm going to go ahead and just assume that you know how to find that info since you probably have Home Assistant already, and this likely isn't your first rodeo. The first thing that you should do is configure an NTP server so that the time is correct. That way, if you use schedules at all, things will happen when you expect them to. Note that I control everything using Home Assistant, so I won't be covering any of the time control features built into WLED. Click Config, then click Time and Macros, check the box for NTP, enter the IP address for your NTP server. Home Assistant has a great NTP add-on called Crony that I really like. Set your time zone, and then click Save. From here, click LED Preferences. If you're using the same strips that I am, here are the settings for the white strips. WS281X, color order GRB. This is where you tell it how long each run is, not how long each individual strip is. Since my strips are 26 LEDs each, my first run starts at 0 and is 52 LEDs long. My next run is the same type, same color settings, but it starts at 52, and since it's 3 strips long, the length is 78 instead of 52. Then the next run of 2 strips starts at 130 and is 52 long. The next one starts at 182 and is 78 long. You get the idea. Do not check any of the boxes for reversed in here. This section is for entire runs, not individual strips. We'll define the strips later. Keep going until you configured all your runs, however many there may be, up to a max of 8 with the Dig-Octa. Now I'll be honest with you here. That button 0 GPIO, I can't remember if that's the default or if I had to set it that way for something or even why it's set that way. There's no IR, and I'm also not using a relay, so none of that matters. I checked the box that was strongly recommended, and I did not check the box that was not recommended. Imagine that. The rest of this stuff is all defaults with the exception of Apply Preset. You'll see that there's a 1 in that box. More on that in a bit. After making your changes, click Save. Next, under User Interface, give your WLED instance a name. Yes, you only have 1 now. Why bother? Just trust me. You're going to end up with more than 1. Just give it some kind of unique, intelligible name. Thank me later. Then set the interface up to look how you like. Explore it, play around with it. I'm not going to go through every setting here. Just know that if you check the box that says, I hate dark mode, you're a psychopath. After you've finished, click Save again. The only other thing we need to do here is if you added a microphone, you'll need to configure it under User Mod. So click User Mod, then check the box for Audio Reactive, and then use the settings that are shown here. Feel free to mess around with config, dynamics, and frequency. I haven't done much with them simply due to lack of time, but I'm sure that you can get your audio reactive effects tuned more to your liking by twisting these here nerd knobs. Click Save again, and then click Back. Now, when you first come in here, you'll see that only one segment, segment 0, is defined. The Start LED will be 0, and the Stop LED will be the number of LEDs in your entire setup. These segments are how you define each individual strip. Change the Stop LED to the number of LEDs in your first strip. In my case, that's 26. Down on the bottom, you'll see Add Segment. Click that, and segment 1 will show up. The Start LED for this will be correct already based on the info that you just entered for segment 0. Change the Stop LED based on the length of your strips. Again, mine are 26 LEDs, so the Stop LED here will be 52. However, this strip has the arrows facing down, so I checked the reverse box. Once you've got all the segments set how you want them, on the right, click the plus preset button. Make sure that the boxes are checked as shown here, and set the Save To ID to 1, then click Save. Now, go back to Config, then LED Preferences, then scroll down to Apply Preset at Boot, and enter a 1 in that box. Then click Save. The reason you have to do this is that if you don't, every time it reboots, your segment definitions are going to be wiped out. I'm sure that's not what you want, especially if you took the time to define some really complex settings. Ask me how I figured that out. Play around with the effects. Note that these are really only cool on RGB strips. Not much happens on white strips. I mean, sure, you'll still see the animation, but without any color changing, it's pretty boring. Next up, let's go get this added to Home Assistant. Head on over to Settings, then Devices and Services. If it doesn't show up automatically, click Add Integration and search for WLED. Enter the IP address. You'll see your device show up with quite a number of entities. I'll walk you through the basics for my white strips from the Dig-Octa. Some more advanced stuff will be in a future video where I discuss a different controller and what I did with that, as well as some more advanced automations besides just power on and off. Anyhow, if we click the device, you'll see the page is very long. Under Controls, you can see there's a main switch followed by switches for each segment. That's right, you can individually control brightness and power for each segment from Home Assistant. You might have noticed that it starts with segment 1, even though in WLED there's a segment 0. In Home Assistant, segment 0 shows up as the name of whatever you assign to the controller instance. So in this case, if we scroll down, you'll see at the bottom of the segments there's a segment named WLED White. Beneath the segment switches are all the individual segment controls. Intensity, color palette, not very useful for white strips. You can reverse the segments from here, as well as control the segment speed. At the bottom, you can see the IP address, total LED count, and some other info if you want to enable it. As for using these strips, I've added them to my dashboard as lights. That way I can turn them on and off and control the brightness. As you can see, I've got some cleanup to do on this dashboard page from stuff that I'm no longer using in my office, but that's for another day. For those of you that are new viewers, I like mushroom cards, so I'm using a mushroom light card to control these strips, and you can see the code here on lines 134 through 148. Note that for CCT LED strips, which are what I'm using for white, even though they are temperature adjustable via WLED, the native WLED integration in Home Assistant cannot adjust the color temp via the UI. But I've read that it can be done using code, which means that you can write it into automations. This has been an open feature request since like May of 2022 or something, so it would appear the devs just don't give a shit about this particular feature. C'est la vie. I've found a Hacks WLED integration that can do this, but there are some kind of spotty reports of it introducing other issues, so I haven't tried it just yet. I haven't really seen a need for that feature for my setup, to be honest. I like the color I currently have them set to. One of these days when I have some free time, I do intend to figure something out there, if for nothing else than to show you guys how it works and teach you all about it. As far as automations, I only have 3. They turn on every morning at 6 a.m. if it's a workday, using the workday sensor. You are using the workday sensor, right? And turn off every day at 5. That way, I know it's time to be done working and go upstairs to hang out with the family. They also turn off as part of the bedtime routine in case I was down here working on videos or something and forgot. That way they aren't left on overnight. All right, time for the Ask Me Anything section from my smart home survey. Come back. Your video topics are good. Thank you. I'm back. What thermostat do you recommend for HomeKit? The one I recommend is the one that I use, the Honeywell T9. It's a Wi-Fi smart thermostat and connects to Home Assistant via HomeKit. Not only do I like that this thermostat can be controlled from Home Assistant, but I also like that it has remote temperature sensors. This is super useful. My house is pretty large, but I still only have a single furnace. As a result of that, if I only use the temperature from where the thermostat was located, which is in the kitchen on the ground floor, then the second floor or the basement might be uncomfortably hot or cold. With these remote sensors, you can program the T9 to pay attention to different rooms of the house or to have it only pay attention to occupied rooms. This way, Monday through Friday during business hours, I can say, I want my office to be 68 degrees, and it will heat or cool my office as needed to maintain that temperature, regardless what happens in the rest of the house, which is empty during those hours. Then at 5 o'clock, I can say, take the average of the kitchen and the parlor and hold that at 68 degrees. The basement might get extra cold down here, or the master suite might get extra hot, but the rooms that we are in are the temperature that we want them. Then again, I can say, starting at 10 p.m., keep the average temperature of the master suite and the nursery at 68 degrees. Now, that may mean that my office is an icebox, but nobody's down here at that time, so it's fine. This system works great. The thermostat and one remote sensor is currently on sale on Amazon for $193.99 as of the time I'm writing this, with additional sensors coming in at just over $30 each. One thing to note is that HomeKit support was added via a firmware update like a year or two ago. So if yours doesn't have it right when you take it out of the box, do an update first and see if it shows up. If you really want to dig deeper into that, I made a video, a year or two ago, all about adding it to Home Assistant and what my environment dashboard page looks like. I'll leave a link in the description. We'll cover the RGB setup in my next WLED video, where we'll also take a look at a smaller, less expensive controller that's capable of not only driving, but powering a strip directly from the USB-C connector that this little guy gets power from. It's pretty slick. You're not going to want to miss it. If you're watching this video at some point in the future, you should see a thumbnail for that video right over here. Until then, you'll see whatever video from my channel that YouTube thinks you would enjoy, so please give that a watch. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you found this episode's t-shirt funny. Thanks for watching, and until next time, go automate something, will ya?